Hello, BookTube. As you know, as I warned you yesterday, as you have been warned by other videos, a horrible thing is right on the horizon. The very worst BookTube event of them all. Garbaugust is coming back for the sequel nobody asked for. Garbaugust is coming back in August. It was created by Ollie at Criminale, and it is designed, as you can tell from the title, to celebrate trash. you are enjoined, commanded to read trash all through the month of August. This is lots and lots of fun. I already have my eye on lots of trashy things, and like last year, I'm sure that I will learn a lot. I'm sure that I will discover, like Magellan, lots of trash worlds that I didn't know existed. But before we get there, before we get to Garbaugust, I thought I would unburden myself of three things, three trashy thoughts that are always on my mind when this subject comes up. Of course, as a book section editor and a book critic, I have been dealing with, in one way or another, trash for a long, long time, not just for Garbaugust. And these considerations always come to my mind. I thought I would air them once again, just to make myself feel a little better, give myself a psychic release valve for these three things. There are three things that always come up in connection with books and trash. I thought we'd go through these three things just to get them off my mind a bit so that I can jump feet first into Garbaugust without preoccupying myself on these things. And they revolve around misconceptions that people have about trash. Some of these misconceptions are shared by some of my Garbaugust co-hosts. I'm sure some of them are shared by you. And I want to air them. Thing number one is extremely common. All of these things are extremely common. Thing number one about trash that I want to tell you, I want to reiterate it in case on some level you've allowed yourself to forget, is this. The fact that you like something does not automatically mean it isn't trash. Can we sit with that for a minute? You are not some sort of infallible, water-divining quality detector. And it is really, if you think about it, the height of reading arrogance to suggest that you are. The fact, if you've read something and you really enjoyed it, if your first mental maneuver is to say, well, I really enjoyed it, so it can't be trash, you're buying into a kind of arrogance that I bet you don't display anywhere else in your life. The fact that you enjoyed something does not mean that thing is not trashed. It does not automatically elevate that thing into something that is quality. Because there are plenty of ways to enjoy trash. Right? The fact that you enjoyed something doesn't at all mean necessarily that the reasons why you were enjoying it had anything to do with its worth. Look at your children. Toad-faced losers, every last one of them. You still like them. That's thing number one that always bothers me, is when people, usually insecure readers, will read something, they like it. They end up enjoying the experience. They were waiting to get to their reading time that day. They were missing subway stops or train stops. And when they get to the end of that experience, they think, well, I really enjoyed that, so it can't be trash. The most epic example of this in recent times was the urge for about 10 years for people who loved the Harry Potter books to do exactly this. I read this 1,000-page book in one night. I've never had a reading experience like this. I was entirely caught up. I was reading it. I bought it at the register in the bookstore. I couldn't even bear to go home. I just went to an aisle in the bookstore, sat and read for hours, rather than wait the 30 minutes just to get back home. We saw, before J.K. Rowling got canceled, we saw a whole generation of readers go through that and have this exact reaction. That if I did that, well, then it can't be trash. So my parents, both of whom are high-powered lawyers in Washington, D.C., are going to talk to the board of my school, where they and their parents have been heavy donors, to make sure that these books are taught in literature classes. Because they can't be bad. I need the validation of that. It can't be that I enjoyed something that was garbage. That has passed for the worst possible reason, because social scolds that we've given power over us have canceled J.K. Rowling and are trying to cancel Harry Potter, the empire that is Harry Potter. But it's sure to arrive somewhere else. I mean, on the adult side of the equation, as I've been ranting on this channel for a long time, years, would be the My Struggle books of Karl Ove Knausgaard. They are self-evident garbage, yet many people find them addictively readable. Can't stand couldn't stand the wait between volumes, couldn't slow down in turning the pages. And those people turned around when they were done with that possession. I'm not denying the reality of that possession, and I'm also not denying their enjoyment. I'm not trying to deny anybody any enjoyment. But those people would turn around from that subsuming experience, exactly the same kind of subsuming that happened with the Harry Potter books for younger readers. They would turn around and say, well, since I had that subsuming experience, that can't have been trash. So I'm going to argue all of the ways that it isn't trash at 3,000 words for $3,000 in the New York Review of Books, and Steve is going to have to read it. That's thing number one about trash that I wanted to clear up. Just because you like something doesn't mean it's not trash. And that is going to dovetail perfectly with thing number 3 that I'm getting to. But before we get to thing number 3, we have to deal with thing number 2. And oh my God, is it number 2 in every sense of the word that you could imagine if you had a filthy mind. Because the insecure readers who are confronted with thing number 1, just because you liked it doesn't mean it's not trash. 90% of them in my life have gone straight to thing number 2 on my list, which is to say, well, it's all subjective anyway. Well, who's to say what's trash and what's not? It's all subjective anyway. There is nothing that you can say to book critics everywhere, by which I mean me, that is more designed to infuriate them than that. It is not all subjective. It is not all subjective. Writing is not the only human endeavor out of all human endeavors that is somehow mystically immune to objective assessment. It is not the one and only exception. If you have an architecture contest to build a cool, environmentally conscious, totally accessible public building, you want it to be a smart, well-designed, aesthetically pleasing building, and you have a competition. That competition will have judges. And a Soviet-style box with no ramps and no air conditioning will not win that contest. And you will know that it didn't win because you will know that the contest had judges. You won't, unless you went to the Rhode Island School of Design, you won't think you yourself should be on that judge panel. But you'll know that they did judge something and that there was a way to judge the things. For architecture, if gorgeous little Tom Daly does a gigantic triple twist somersault dive off a platform so high that you'd throw up if you got halfway there, there's a panel of judges at the bottom who will determine how well he did his dive. What was his head positioning like? Was his body nice and symmetric? Did he actually finish the dive? Did he finish the maneuver that he wanted to do? Did he enter the water clean and neat with barely a ripple? What was his form like? Most of those judges will have long experience in judging athletic events. Some of them will be former divers themselves. You won't expect that you should be on that judging committee, no matter how much experience you may have had in the late 90s with Tom Daly's style. If perhaps you had been trolling the pubs and the clubs of London before he settled down and became a respectably married man, you may have been very familiar with aspects of his form, but you wouldn't expect to be on that judging panel. But you wouldn't question it either. If you somehow managed to get all the way up to that 50-foot tall platform and somehow screw up the courage to get all the way to the end of that diving board and then dive off into a pool you could barely see, you wouldn't expect, and you would never assert, that the dive that resulted was in any way comparable to what Tom Daly does, even when he's not really trying. You wouldn't in a million years assert that they were in any way comparable. In other words, you would acknowledge a spectrum. That if we're talking in such silly terms, there is a spectrum of the 50-foot diving, Olympic diving. You're at one end and he's at the other. and so on and so forth down the line. You absolutely, when you are presented with the options for who is going to perform your heart bypass surgery, and you get, the clown doctor from The Simpsons. Hi, everybody. If you get Dr. Lou Rivera and then you get the greatest heart valve replacement surgeon in New York, you are not going to sit at that table when someone presents the two of you and says, I will pay for either one of these. You only need one. One person is going to perform your heart valve surgery. Depending on how well they do it, you will live out the year or not. You're not going to look at that choice and say, it's all subjective. I mean, really, who can really know? I'll pick at random. No, you won't. Well, it is the height of human egotism or human exceptionalism to say that despite all of that you already know all of this, despite all of that, somehow writing is the one exception. It's the one thing humans do that can't be assessed critically, that has no objective standard. That if I like it, rather than admit I liked it even though it's trash because I'm just that insecure, I won't give that up. I won't say that. So rather than say that, I'll say that you can't judge anything. That is crazy. That is a crazy overreaction to the insecurity of having liked a piece of trash. Of course, writing can be assessed. Of course it can. Of course it's not all subjective. You know this yourself. When one of the aforementioned hideous toad-faced children of yours writes a composition of one page in, scrawling crayon on a piece of paper for a school assignment the next morning, you are not going to say that is as technically accomplished as a page that Edith Wharton sweated over for a year. You're going to say just the opposite. You're going to say, no, there's nothing like, there's no comparison to be made whatsoever. Well, the one has much greater sentimental value for me. I like the one much more than the other. But no, I'm not comparing them at all. And once you've done that, you've admitted there's a spectrum. And if there's a spectrum, then it follows, as night follows day, that this is not all subjective. I don't know why in the last 170 years I've had to make this point so often. Maybe it's because of point number 3. It could also be from point number 1. It could be that I have to make this point so often because there are lots of insecure readers in the world. You shouldn't be. If there's one thing that this little corner of BookTube is underscoring more than anything else, it's that you have every bit of right to what you enjoy. And that ought to remove any hint of insecurity. We are out here all the time, all of us, talking about what we like and don't like, no matter what it is. And that's fine, provided we don't take it too far. The second thing about trash that I hate is when people say it's all subjective. Not only do I hate that because I automatically want to say, why don't you pick on somebody else's profession? But also because I think I understand where this contention comes from. You can see it in my examples. The heart valve replacement surgeon, the Olympic diving judge, the architecture contest. In all of those cases, you're willing to admit that although there is a spectrum and although you will abide by the verdict of the judges, you're not qualified to be a judge yourself. And people hate that when that kind of consideration comes anywhere near the subjects of writing or reading. People hate that, absolutely hate the idea that this might be something you can train to get better at than you were when you just learned it off the turnip truck in high school. That it might be something you could train to get better at. People hate that, absolutely hate it. They hate it when it comes to writing, but they nuclear hate it when it comes to reading. The idea that there could be levels of skill in reading drives a lot of people to madness. And the form that madness usually takes is, it's all subjective. It's all subjective. I mean, who really knows? It isn't all subjective, and if you read literature critically for a living, you will be in a really good position to see what it's doing right and what it's doing wrong. How technically, objectively, it might be failing. So if you're tempted, especially for Garbaugust, to say, well, it's all subjective anyway. I mean, who really knows whether or not there even is such a thing as trash? I can't believe that of all places in the world, that an event that actually is called Garbaugust might be the place where people would congregate who say there really isn't anything such thing as garbage. Of course there is such a thing as garbage. And it is not a product of critical snobbery, okay? I am the only critic in Garbaugust this year, just like I was last year. I'm not the bad guy, and I'm certainly not a snob. It's not a product of critical snobbery. It's not a product of marketing, of book marketing. Well, if you call it trash, then it is. No. Trash in terms of marketing might be a way to look at certain books, but there is such a thing as books that are bad. There is such a thing as books that are garbage. Not because of labeling, not because of snobbery, not because of, elitism at schools, what they think and whatnot. No. All of that kind of thinking feeds into the idea that it's all subjective. It isn't. It isn't all subjective. Some things are worse than others. Some things are poorly done. So if you're tempted for Garbaugust to say, that's all subjective, kindly don't say it to me. It is a nonsense position. You can say it if you want, but it's a nonsense position. Writing is not the only exception in the whole world. The one thing humans do that cannot be assessed in any way is just this nebulous cloud out there. And the reason why you don't need to do that, I've said there's a progression from 1 to 2. Insecure readers who say, well, if I liked something, then it can't be trash. So I'm going to think up all sorts of codswallop ways to defend its quality. Hence the entire school of people defending first William Faulkner and then Cormac McCarthy. If I liked it, then it can't be trash. So I'm going to come up with all sorts of literary criticism terms for this garbage in order to elevate it above its station as garbage. That kind of insecure reader often leads to the second thing, which is when you confront them with the first thing, they will go to the second thing. They will say, well, it's all subjective anyway. I mean, really, who knows? Good, bad, it could be anything. You never know. We're all groping in the dark. Maybe that one page that my kid wrote on the bus before his first period is as good as anything that Marilyn Robinson ever wrote. Maybe it is. Who knows? You don't live that way. You don't assess things that way, not just other things, but also books. You don't live that way. You don't assess books that way. I think the main reason why people are driven to say that is because of thing number 1. And the reason why it's not important to do that is because of thing number 3 that I want to say. My trashy thought number 3 is that it's perfectly okay to like trash. Obviously, I would think that would go without saying in an event called Garbaugust. It is perfectly okay to like trash. The only reason why you would have the reaction in trashy thought number 1, that if I liked it, it mustn't be trash, is because you think on some level, ingrained into you by American Puritanism, that it's wrong to like trash. So if I liked it, it can't be trash. I don't want to tell on myself that way, but it's not a tell. It's not a tell. The quality of how a piece of literature is done doesn't have to be connected with how much you like it. The quality of a piece of literature, fine. That you can lay out on a dissecting table, and I can back up my points about anything that I say is good or bad. I can back them up, and most of the time my points will not be answerable. I've been doing this a long time, but I not only can't touch your enjoyment of something, I wouldn't want to. To me, that is sacrosanct and by far the most important thing. Now, naturally, as a critic, I like to think that there is a correlation between how well a thing is done, measurably, critically, and your likelihood of liking it from a standing start. If you come at it with momentum, sentimentality, reading this author my whole life, remembering my childhood, handed down from my father, if you come at it with momentum, that changes the game. But if you come at something from a standing start, maybe a stretching start. You're going to give them some quality trash yoga, little baby. No? Come on. Ooh. Ooh. Oh. All right. Now you have a reason to watch this video. I'll put that in the title. Like I was saying, I like to think that there's a correlation between how well a thing is done and how much people will enjoy it. Obviously, the American book market does not bear me out in that regard, but I can have my dreams. But the point of the first trashy thought and the justification in the second trashy thought that maybe there is no such thing as trash, maybe who could tell, maybe it's all subjective, that all leads to the third part, which I think would solve the first two, which is that it's perfectly okay to like trash. It's perfectly okay to love trash. I myself love lots of trash. All I want people to do for Garbaugust, so as not to annoy me and defibrillate my transplanted rhesus monkey heart, is to stop saying the first two things and just concentrate on the third thing. Of course, you can like trash. I would assume that a lot of us are going to love the trash that we read for August. What I think I'm going to see a lot of, I certainly saw a lot of it last year, is people saying, oh yeah, I'm reading this piece of trash for Garbaugust, but it's not really trash. Here's my list of gerrymandered reasons why this piece of garbage that I read is not garbage because I enjoyed it. The ground zero, the battleground, the typical focal point of this will be movie novelizations, which are by their very definition garbage. They cannot be good. By their definition, they can't be, and I've never known one that was. Typically, that is the Omaha Beach that people go to. They say, well, no, despite the fact that the so-called author of this book did not invent any of the characters, is not at liberty to change anything, has such a brutal deadline that he can't even add an adverb. He doesn't have the time to add an adverb in the afternoon. And despite the fact that it bears almost no relationship to the thing that was eventually on the screen and doesn't meditate on that thing in any interesting way at all, despite any of that, despite the fact that the author of the book literally did not write any of it, despite any of that, I'm going to say that these things are sudden hidden gems of quality. But it doesn't have to be movie adaptation. It can be anything. What I would like for Garbaugust is for us to concentrate on trashy thought number 3, which is that it's perfectly okay to like garbage. When we talk about what we like, we are not having a critical discussion. So let's remove the middle part completely. This nonsense about how it's all subjective. That is an attempt to marry the critical to the personal in ways that aren't necessary. What do you care? If you're in the midst of a BookTube event celebrating the reading of garbage, which I love as much as anybody, why do you care if this thing is not really garbage? No, really. No, it's really good. You care about it, obviously, because of trashy thought number 1. Because somehow or other, the idea that it's wrong to like trash has seeped into the groundwater of your moral makeup. So when you end up liking something, well, then the number one reactions you have is that it can't be trash. I must immediately engage in an extensive rearguard action to protect myself from the accusation that I like trash. What I'm trying to say in trashy thought number 3 is that there's nothing wrong with liking trash. Nothing at all. The wrong part comes in saying either that the trash you like isn't trash or that nothing is trash. Those are justifications. Those are rearguard actions. They don't need to have any place in Garbaugust. They don't need to get at Steve's goat for the whole month of August. So I thought I would lay them on the table so that we can just clear the air and move on from here to enjoy our trash in August without calling it effing Solzhenitsyn. That would be great. If we could do that, if we could all agree to do that, that would be great. Anyway, because the last thing you want me to do is go gray. Anyway, I'm going to wrap up these trashy thoughts. I'm looking forward to Garbaugust. I have a lot more meta videos to do before I sink into a routine of book analysis. I want to talk about trash a lot more, but I wanted to get these thoughts off my mind first before we start discussing trash in the Kantian sense. Anyway, I'm going to wrap this up, but I'll be back. Thank you.